All right, babies. Let's dive deep, or at the very least, let's bring shit to the surface. Hi, how are we today? Yes, I slept at 12:30 and I woke up at 5:30. I'm enjoying this. I'm not gonna lie, man. Such a vibe, and I feel like I can actually I can do work differently. But for now, we have a video. And the video is the thought of energy, anything worthy of an accomplishment that drives the driven, the drive, then it struck. Energy exists in their states. Energy exists in 3 states: fight, flight, freeze. While the state of 1 is where everything grows. What the fuck, bro? Okay, let's try again. The thought of energy, period. Anything worthy of an accomplishment. Anything worthy of an accomplishment. The drive. Then it struck. Energy exists in 3 states: fight, flight, and freeze. Okay? Which the state of why is where, or when is where everything grows. While the state of when is where everything grows. I have no idea what the fuck I'm talking about, man. I'm gonna keep reading it. The thought of energy. Anything worthy of an accomplishment. Notice there's the thought of energy. Dot. Anything worthy of an accomplishment. Dot. The drive. When I say then it struck, I'm kind of like, it's an epiphany moment, right? Energy exists in 3 states: fight, flight, and freeze. Freeze is when you're overwhelmed. While the state of when is where everything grows. I don't think that word is when. But moments like these, I don't know, let's take the gist of this and basically let's just look at energy in the form of a relationship. Because here I mentioned fight, flight, and freeze. And I'd imagine it's when I'm fighting or flight, or when fight or flight or freeze. Can that be applied to everything? Because the fighting energy could also be the exciting energy, right? But it could also be the anxious energy, correct? And then the flight energy could also be because all of them is the same, right? All of them are the same in terms of, are we, fight, flight, and freeze are the same energy. It's the same energy. Okay, so energy is energy, period, done, okay? It exists in 3 states. In a state where it's kind of like moving towards something, moving away from something, and where it's just kind of like sporadically like moving on its own. And maybe I could use the coffee as an example, right? Because or water, whatever. Just like, if you heat water, you're taking energy and putting it in water. And what happens with water is it basically starts warming up, right? And getting hotter is the actual word. And then basically as you're kind of like creating, that is energy entering water. I think that's fight. And when you stop putting energy inside, what happens is energy starts kind of like leaving. Energy leaving water basically is flight. And then freeze. All freeze technically is when water is frozen solid. But I'd imagine is when freezing is when energy has nowhere to go, right? Because as water warms up and as water cools down, energy is getting in and escaping. It's really just like entropy, right? Like as water gets hotter, it's low level of entropy. And as it gets colder, it dives into high levels of entropy. And the whole idea of entropy is how much, I think, if I'm not mistaken, entropy is how much, let me just read it properly. Entropy is how much energy, the speed of energy is small. Dispersal, okay, entropy is the measure of energy dispersal in a system. But it tends to increase in isolated systems over time. So like, if it's a very, like the sun, for example, has extremely low entropy. And slowly, basically, right, as it releases energy, it's getting into higher entropy. Yes, if I'm not mistaken, there's kind of like, in my head, I always saw them as, I thought high entropy would come with high energy, but that's the other way around. If you have high energy, that means you have low entropy, because like high energy has to go somewhere. And that's basically what I'm talking about when it comes to the sun. So fight, flight are the different angles of entropy, and freeze is basically no entropy. There's kind of like, it literally is. Either there's no energy or energy is trapped. Right? Energy is trapped. Moving to high entropy, moving to low entropy, it's just isolated system. An isolated system, that means no entropy. It doesn't go up, it doesn't go down. Technically, there are no isolated systems, or isolated systems kind of like crash, I guess. The whole point, like if you meet a lion and you want to fight, okay, you're fighting, there's a way out. And if you flight, there's a way out. If you freeze, you're gonna die. Lion's gonna fucking eat you. So So thinking about energy in terms of anything worthy of an accomplishment, it's a relationship between these two, right? And I'm assuming that that relationship creates that misbalance, or like it creates an imbalance of sort. And sometimes you see something and you get really excited, you get overwhelmed, you freeze. Sometimes you see something like not as exciting, and if you give it minimal energy, what happens is kind of like shifts or changes, right? And when you get really excited, its energy triggered your energy, and it's consuming your energy. Not really consuming it in a productive way, right? Because ultimately, you giving it energy versus it taking energy. So the fight and the fight part is very much, I don't know, a warrior stance. Is the difference between fighting sporadically for life or actually in a battlefield where you're calm, you're collected, and you're thinking of things. There's a beautiful up and down behind creating a relationship when energy is involved. And I feel that kind of like circulates around our interest, because if you look at something and you go like, like where everything grows, how things work, there's always that relationship between, whether it's a tree, you and the environment, the tree and the environment, the tree and the soil. There are always all these dimensions of, I guess, energy exchanges. And I wouldn't call them energy exchanges, because ultimately more is coming out of it. There is a development in energy. Or at the very least, like the attention to something kind of like builds energy around it or allows more energy to pass through it. So what if energy exists in three states? Energy exists everywhere though, right? So it's either flowing, it's either moving, or it's either kind of like stagnant. And maybe the free sport works in both ways. It becomes an isolated system. That means energy is kind of like going up and down and being crazy. Or it becomes an isolated system as in like, it doesn't necessarily have crazy energy inside of it that's bottled up, because like sometimes you freeze because you have no energy, and sometimes you freeze because you have a lot of energy and you don't know what to do with it, so it overwhelms you. Maybe fight or flight are opposite sides of the spectrum, but when it comes to freeze, it has a different dimension. What am I thinking of? I'm thinking that we are nodes for energy. Well, again, like some things emit energy and create energy, or at the very least have stored energy for so long, are able to kind of like build around it. For us, we consume and then we basically give energy out, right? We eat, we sit under the sun. Like, talk to people that stay at home and eat all the time, they're low on energy. Talk to people that are outside and they don't eat as much, they're high in energy. You get it? It's kind of like this weird balance between where we get our energy from, but we are basically transmitters of energy, and we also can't, I would say transducers, right? I actually mentioned this earlier somewhere. Yeah, we're transducers, the actuators of the world. Us, animals, trees, plants, right? Like, we're a lot more creative in where we place our energy in, while plants, trees, and animals are a lot more like, you can actually figure out the patterns because they're primitively designed, or at the very least the consciousness they have is still on that level. Definitely is interesting to consider these things. I don't know, not the best videos, but I love you guys and thank you.